Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, here at Scrum.org, CEO here at Scrum.org even. Today's podcast is focused on the capabilities and skills of professional product ownership. The professional product ownership capabilities and skills provide a view of what we believe are important skills and I guess capabilities for product ownership. They describe the things a product-led organization needs to think about when improving their capabilities. To talk about this very interesting subject, I'm joined by two amazing PSTs, Paul Kuijten and Fredrik Wendt. They have been heavily involved in its development and the rollout of this capability model. Welcome to the podcast, Paul and Fredrik.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. This is actually the third podcast on this subject. In the first podcast, and if I get this wrong, remind me, Paul and Fredrik. In the first podcast, we discussed the overall model. The second podcast, we talked about engage with vision. And today, we're going to deep dive into lead to value, one of the three main areas of the model. I think that's right. So lead to value. Paul, that sounds... It sounds like a management book. Can you? It really does, doesn't it? It should be a management book. Can you describe this capability for our audience?
Yeah. So an important part of product ownership is you're the one that needs to go out there. You're the one who needs to point to where the value is. And that's a daunting task, I think, to be doing that. And that's what we call lead to value. So, but to be able to point to where the value is, you need to be very aware of your surroundings. So a lot of the things that we consider leading to value is all about contextual awareness. So that's one bit of it. And the other, and then being able to verbalize what it is that you find, being able to express what it is that you find. So to be aware of your context, be able to express what you find. And then finally, you need to be able to rally those around you in the pursuit of that value. So that's what lead to value is about. There's different areas that we consider underneath that.
Okay, well, let's see if I understand this. So ultimately, the word value is super important, and I was really intrigued by you talk about the context, the environment, the situation determines value, and I think that to me resonated because value is very situational and contextual, and that's one of the reasons why it's so damn hard, right, to describe. Why is that valuable? Is it the if you eat something, why are they eating that hot dog as opposed to that other hot dog? Where's the value? Is it, they're the same potentially in terms of nutrients, they taste very similar, they're easy to oh no, well, it's about the environment, they know that brand, the timing, the machine, the person that's selling it. Value is so contextual, which is interesting. So that's one element. And then the other element is actually once you have this understanding to be able to communicate and lead people on this journey to value. Is that the essence of this capability?
Yeah, that's really what it's about. And so we talk a lot of contextual awareness in terms of the market, your competitors, the ecosystem that provides value, because often you're not doing it with only with your own product. You're part of a bigger system. So that's like outside. But then there's also the inside. Your organization that you have to work with, the capabilities of that organization, the extent to which you can use that organization as a value generating machine. Those are some of the aspects around it.
Yeah, I think that's also very interesting as well, because what I've discovered, people often say to me, well, why don't you do that? At Scrum.org, we have amazing set of products, an amazing community of trainers, an amazing access, well over 1.2 million people come to our website every month. We have also, well, we do that. And sometimes it isn't as straightforward as, does it conform to the mission? Can you economically do it? Is it a cultural fit? Does it make sense? Does your business model support it? Does it, where is it in terms of its evolution, in terms of a technology or whatever? There's many elements that determine if something is the most valuable. I'm not saying it's not valuable, but the most valuable to focus on. Fredrik, you talk about value. You've helped me over the 9 years that I've known you spend a lot of time reframing my backlog, or messing up my backlog, as it's also known as, and thinking more about outcomes and value. What's your take on this?
I think it's exactly that. It says lead to value. So we have to define the value, just like Paul and you are talking about. There are so many contexts. In the webcast we did a couple of months ago, we talked about it's like sailing a sea, a pirate ship or whatever, but I think in real life you have multiple seas that you're trying to navigate at the same time. Paul talked about the external ones, where we look at market users and those kind of things, what's happening around us outside of our company. And then there's the internal, and there are multiple oceans in that as well. Like, what is our technical capability of actually delivering stuff? How do we improve that compared to our competitors? Is that something we need to build and improve in order to realize the value we're pointing towards? So it's making all of this very practical is this area when I think about lead to value. Providing enough leadership and opportunities to understand all of these contexts so that it becomes practical.
Yeah, so people can actually do stuff. So Paul, all right, so we've got this broad description of lead to value. What are the elements that comprise it? What are the sub capabilities that organizations need to wrestle with?
So a big part of it is, since we're all talking about product ownership, product-led, these kinds of things, then of course, it sort of starts with, hey, what product do I want in the first place? What is the vehicle that we could be using to generate value for our customers or users? So that's sort of where it starts, and then so that's one of the elements in the lead to value. And then immediately, you cannot really do that if you don't understand the market. So you need to have an understanding of the market, the customers and users within that market. What are they after? What kind of outcomes could you be generating for them? So if you're talking EBM terms, you need to be able to spot those satisfaction gaps that are out there that you can start addressing with your product. So if you find those outcomes, that's when you could start deciding on, hey, can we segment some of those outcomes? And can we base our products on that? Is that going to be one product that we have to use for that? Is that a suite of products? So that's really where it starts, I think. And then after that, you're going to have to take into account a ton of constraints. And I think you two were talking about it previously. There's constraints that you have to deal with. It's like, does it fit with our culture? Does it fit with who we want to be as a company? Does it fit with the capabilities that I have? Does it fit with the way I'm currently structured? So then you start taking into account those constraints again. And maybe you need to lift some of those constraints. Maybe you need to strengthen some of the capabilities. And that's what we put in another element on the lead to value, which is called work with the organization. So that's really all about, can you play to the organization's strengths? Or, if you don't have the strengths you need, can you amplify some of these things you need or improve some of these things you need? So that's basically what it's about. Another important element in it is about strategy. Yeah, so it's really about, you have a product strategy for your single product, but there's a wider strategy element at play as well, which we then refer to as business strategy, and you need to be aligned with that. So your product strategy needs to be in line with the business strategy, how can you describe a strategy? How can you translate that into goals and roadmaps that we talked about in Engage with Vision? So that's basically the main elements in Lead to Value.
Okay, so let me say, we got understand the market, work with the organization, execute and influence and connect with the business strategy, develop and maintain the product strategy, and define the product. And obviously that product, it might not be new products, it might be existing capabilities in your organization that you're chopping up in a product-driven sort of way. It's not just for sort of like new things. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And segmenting your offering is a way to define your product.
Yeah, so one thing about defining a product, and I'd love your take on this. So in the 2020 Scrum Guide, we actually defined product for the first time. And that was, described this sort of, hey, it has a boundary, has customers, has users, has, known stakeholders, has value, has obviously cost, dependencies, etc. In organizations, do you find that actually defining the product is actually kind of hard for most organizations?
Yes.
For sure. For sure.
Good. It's not just me then. Oh, I'm so glad, because I thought I was just saying the wrong words. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So
there's good news, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
You're free to define whatever product you want.
No.
And that's also what makes it so scary. Yeah, it's not. There's no rules for. There's a way you ideally come about defining your product, but there's no like, okay, this could be a product and this could not. And what we encounter is there's a million ways people go about defining their products with a lot of improvement opportunities. But there's companies that call their channel the product. So they call it.
That sounds awful. Though interestingly, we might be one of those companies, because we definitely think of PST, Professional Scrum Trainers, as a product sometimes. And then we get confused. Is it a channel for our products? Is it a product itself? Well, obviously it has some elements of product. So is the actual product, and then we get very confused and have to sit down. But it's funny. We're fortunate that a gentleman called Dow Fernandez used to be a CIO at Fidelity and TIA, and he introduced the product way of thinking to TIA, and it worked on it at Fidelity. And he talks a lot about that this process is this defining products is very iterative, and it seems to be and a little bit messy, and organizations don't like that. They get very freaked out by the sort of messiness, the fact that these product boundaries can change depending on how things work.
Yeah, and also there's a ton of stuff going into that. If you look at banking, for instance, I said some companies call channel a product. Banks were very good at that. So like 5 to 10 years ago, it was all about the channels, and the channels were the products basically, and how they organize themselves. That's shifted a bit again. So they're shifting a bit more towards the core products. So they're organizing themselves around mortgages again, or they're organizing themselves around loans again. So it's like a thing that's perpetually in motion, I think.
Yeah.
But there is.
And so why do you think that these things can change so much? Do you think it's fundamentally the product as a construct? I mean, it doesn't really exist. It's an abstraction by all of us to describe the value that we're delivering to customers in a way that allows us to align our organization and fund it, etc. Fredrik, I'd be really interested. Why does it change? What do you see?
It changes because things change. I'll make that clear.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
I used to own a Volvo, right? I have a car, and talking to Volvo, look inside that company. What is their product? Is it transportation, or is it that actually that you own something that you can be proud of? You can actually buy a physical product. It helps in this regard sometimes that the product is actual physical, right? You know what you look at your product, the thing you bought, and I'm thinking of it as a user or a customer. But that is not the only way to think of it, right? When I enter the car, I'm now listening to music from Spotify or Tidal or Apple Music, but it's still coming through my product of Volvo. So that's one thing, we are changing our products constantly and we're collaborating with other partners, which is why you want to think about the ecosystem as one part of this lead to value. But the other part is also that society is changing. Most people here in Sweden, they don't own their cars anymore. They rent them or they lease them or they have some kind of subscription. I lived in Gothenburg for over 15 years, and we had this service where I got new cars every 18 months. They've just changed all the cars and they made sure they were very, someone else took care of the car. I just decided now I want to travel, and I could pick whatever was necessary at the time. If I wanted to go to IKEA to get the new furniture, I would get a big car. If I was just doing weekly grocery shopping, I would get a small car. So for me, that product was a subscription. I just paid a monthly fee, a little extra if I needed extra stuff, but I didn't own a car. So the product and the society is changing. That's what I'm saying. Most products change in how we think of them as a society. We're getting more into a subscription-based world.
And I think what you're highlighting, which is important, is the orientation around the customer for product. So defining a product needs to have a clear customer, even if that customer's internal, even if that customer's just another part of your organization, because if you understand that customer, in the case, customers in Sweden seem to be very different in America. Buying a car is a huge status symbol. It's, we live in a very spread out society, and so cars, freeways, the American dream are all sort of connected. But so defining, people buy cars here. They don't buy transportation, particularly my age, the sort of like 40 to 50-year-olds. I think the younger generation have a different view of the product. So orienting around that, I think, is really important. And then I think the other thing that you said, which I think is interesting, is the capabilities of your organization. This is an abstraction, a useful abstraction to enable us to align people, tools, money, etc., on these capability that we're providing to customers. How that has some impact on where the boundaries are as well, surely.
It has a huge impact, right? If we're delivering, Volvo the car, something you buy once, you exchange of money and then you're done. We are going to organize differently compared to if you have this subscription set up, right? So how you phrase your product is not just a customer thinking perspective, it's an internal perspective as well.
Yeah.
And that's why it becomes so hard. You're trying to balance all of these perspectives at the same time and find a feasible way of running a business as well.
No, that's really interesting that you mentioned subscription, because I forgot to mention one more element in the lead to value bit, which is pricing strategies and tactics and managing the financial aspects of the product. So yeah, a product is also about the way the value capture is being done, for instance. So it's such a wide area. It's baffling, really.
It is baffling. I mean, the financial aspects is really interesting because there's two elements. Obviously, if you're building internal products, there is a cost, there's a benefit, there's a value. You aren't necessarily, going to swipe and getting money for it or whatever. It is a little bit more transient, a little bit more disconnected, from value. But one thing that this approach, this product mindset, you're talking about product ownership. Now, ownership, you can't be a product subscriber, by the way, Fredrik. You have to own it. And the reason why, one of the key reasons why Ken loved that word ownership so much was because it emphasized the fact that you're making decisions that aren't short term, they're long term. And the total cost of ownership, that's one thing Daryl Fernandez, used when he was at Fidelity, and I was working as an analyst, and he was introducing or working with product model there. One element of the entire story was around total cost of ownership, because one of the problems that many organizations face is the project culture. You don't really worry about that. You basically introduce all sorts of stuff. And why not? Because on time, on budget, getting it delivered to your customers, is the most important thing. And then you start accumulating technical debt. You start accumulating business debt, meaning, it gets harder to use. The product becomes less valuable. You
start introducing dependencies, and really to be more product led. Will simplify actually knowing what costs what, because a lot of organizations have no clue. It's like, okay, we have this thing running in the basement. How do we allocate those costs across our product portfolio? And they don't do it. No.
And I think that's really, really interesting. And but that's one of the problems with the product mindset and this product operating model, because that means organizations have to see those costs. And imagine if I'm an executive that's going to be here 5 to 8 years, or I think in Europe it's a little bit longer. Here it's 3 to 5 years in America. You're like, do I really want to see all of those costs and those issues? How about we just deliver this stuff and not worry about the future so much? But that is one very challenging element of this way of thinking about the world. I think so.
And speaking about financials and managing, the financial part of your product, a couple of years ago I met this person called Bjarte Buksnes. He worked in the finance department at what was then called Statoil, the Norwegian oil company. They're called Equinor these days. Yes.
Yeah.
So I met him because I heard about this thing called beyond budgeting, and beyond budgeting is it's a thing of its own, but it's about one thing that really stuck with me is thinking about what's driving your decision making, especially your value decision making. He came from a company where they build oil drilling rigs and all of that. Those have a lifespan of 50 years or even longer. And I remember he had told the story of when one day a person walked up and said, hey, we have this idea for an app that's going to help our customers do X, Y, Z. It would take like 3, 4, 5 weeks of a good team. And Bjarte just realized, shit, we are about to push this small, very valuable idea that we can realize in a short time span through the same project model that we used to build oil rigs for 50 years. So one of the things that really stuck with me is this idea: what is driving your decision making? Is it just yearly budgets, or is it opportunities, options, real needs?
Yeah.
So I think that making this leading to value tangible also means thinking about how you make decisions. Are those based on what you want them to be, or is it just because, hey, we have a fiscal year and we need to make new blah blah blah? No, it should be about value. Define the value. Enable your organizations to rally around those values. Look at them. See, what do we want to target next? Make it practical.
I think that is a very different mindset. It's thinking about basically your organization's portfolio capabilities, or those which we're calling products, that have customers and have value, etc. And it's basically thinking about that holistically. And that over time, obviously, new ones come in, old ones get end of life. I mean, end of lifing products, from my experience of working in many large organizations, it requires an act of God. They they don't die. They sort of exist forever. And thinking about it as that portfolio and managing each product differently in respect to that, but in a broader sort of investment strategy or portfolio investment strategy. And because if we did that, it would simplify a lot of the decisions we're making, which is awesome. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on this really interesting topic. I think that the idea of lead to value as a key capability of product ownership is super important. It's something that I wrestle with as a product owner in my own organization. The financial elements notwithstanding, recently I've learned a lot more about that as the market has gone down a little bit, which is interesting. But I definitely feel that I've learned something, and obviously there's a lot more details on the website. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Fredrik, for spending the time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Okay, well, and thank you, listeners, for listening to today's Scrum.org community podcast. Today, we talked a lot about one of the core capabilities of the professional product ownership capabilities and skills model that was lead to value. And sometimes that leading can be very challenging. I say from personal experience, or lead slowly to value is often the phrase that I use to describe my own use of it. Hopefully you're a little bit better than me. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe, share with friends, and of course, come back and listen to some more. I am a very lucky chap because I get to listen to and talk to lots of different types of people, a variety of guests, talking about everything in the area of professional Scrum, product thinking, and of course, Agile. Thank you for your time. Scrum on.